we're just running through some intros. I'll just backtrack very quickly. So my name's Alpha. I work for Creative Medical Research. We haven't done any roundtable intros yet, so you've not missed a huge amount. I was just saying that the reason this session is a one-off focus group we're running with FreeStyle Libre Flash users, and it's just really to understand your experiences with the system. I've just mentioned that we have a number of diabetes device companies observing. The session's being audio and video recorded, and obviously that will be used for analysis and also potentially for marketing purposes as well. Can't be used for any other reason, any other purpose other than that. And the session lasts about 2 hours. It will go very quickly. They always do. Touch wood. They always
So we're not the first.
We're not the
first group. First focus group.
This is a one-time focus group, yes. Often with research projects you'll be running multiple groups. This is just a single focus group that we're running with you guys. So the timing's 2 hours. Obviously you have drinks, sandwiches. There are some sugar-free and sugared drinks in the fridge over there as well. If you have a mobile, if you're able to either put it on silent or turn it off, that would be
Can I tell you that my hearing aids work on this?
That's fine.
So I'm just saying, if I'm fiddling with it,
Okay.
I'm not phoning my granny. I'm just.
That's fine. Thank you for the.
But I actually have you on maximum at the moment because the acoustics aren't very good in here.
Right. Okay. Sure. Okay. I can turn off the aircon if you want. If that's making it.
Well, I'm okay at the moment.
Okay. Sure. Okay. Thanks for letting me know. Before we start, just to very quickly run through some practicalities in terms of adverse events reporting. So I'm, as part of regulation, I'm required to pass on any adverse events that are mentioned during research. And what I mean by an adverse event is any undesirable event that's experienced by a participant or a patient when using a medical product. If an adverse event is mentioned during the course of a session, even if it's been reported, I'm obliged to report that to the MHRA, to the yellow card system. It's very rare something like that's mentioned, but just to make you aware. Okay, are we happy to carry on? Fantastic. Okay, as I said, there aren't any rights or wrongs, so it'd be great just to make it as relaxed as possible. Just feel free to jump in as and when you feel like doing so. So, having just met you, I don't really know anything about you. So, would you mind just very, very briefly just going around the room? And if you could just tell me just your first name, how old, if you're comfortable with, and also when you were first diagnosed with diabetes, please.
Hi, I'm Mark. I live in London, 28. I was diagnosed with diabetes in 2000, so 16 years ago.
Okay. Thanks, Mark.
I'm Jenny. I am 36. And I was diagnosed in 2005, I think, 10 years ago.
Thanks, Jenny.
I'm Ronna. I'm 40 and I was diagnosed 20 years ago.
Okay. Is it Rana?
Ronna.
Lovely. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Polly. I'm 27 and I was diagnosed 10 years ago as well.
Okay. Thanks, Polly.
I'm Jane. I'm 39. I was diagnosed 31 years ago.
Okay.
Do I get a prize?
Well,
So far.
Yes, so far.
To meet you.
Okay.
I'm Jane and I was diagnosed 30 years ago.
Oh, so close.
You just bit me.
Lovely. Thanks, Jane.
Tricia, I was diagnosed when I was 65, which is 6 years ago.
Okay. Thank you, Tricia.
Tyron. I'm from Essex. I'm 40. I was diagnosed when I was 30, so 27 years.
Great. Well, that really is the only time I'll ask you to go around one at a time. So from here on, just feel free to chip in as and when. Before we kind of move on to talk about FreeStyle Libre, I thought it'd be nice just to get a bit of a feel for your background in terms of how you're managing your diabetes and also maybe kind of therapies you've used in the past currently. So at the moment, can you just briefly just give me a feel for the therapy that you're on? How are you managing
What do you mean by therapy?
whether you're injecting, MDI?
Oh, I see. What sort of devices are we on?
Yeah, just really
Therapy to me is sort of on a couch.
So that's fine. Okay, just really so I can get a feel for what you're using, etc.?
I'm on an Omnipod pump.
Okay.
too. Yep.
Okay. I'm
And
on a
I've
pump at AcuCheck.
Yeah, and I've been on it for 4 years.
Okay. It's got a few pumps. How about the rest of you?
I'm just manual pens.
Okay. Pens. Which pens do you?
Prida and Lantis.
Okay.
Mana Animas pump as well.
Okay. Check.
Pens, Humlock and Lantus.
Okay. Sure.
Omnipod and Libre. And I had Medtronic before that, VO, but it just never seemed to work for me. They had to keep changing it.
Right. Okay. Might talk a bit more about that. Okay. Ty. How about you?
MDI, Humalog, fast-acting Levemir,
Right.
long-acting.
Okay. So how long have you been on how long have you been using a pump or Omnipod or pen? Has that always been the case, or have you used different a different regimen in the past?
When I was first diagnosed, it's usual thing was syringes. I can't even remember what it was. It wasn't Insulet. The one before pump was Insuletard.
Mm.
I think I moved on to Lantus, and then MDI.
Mm-hmm.
And then 4 years ago I started on a pump,
Okay.
which
So
I didn't want to do.
you did, or
No, not especially, because you just feel very automated.
okay.
And I thought it was going to be very difficult, and getting around with a great big thing stuck to me.
So what, if you don't mind me asking, why the transition to pump?
I found it it became very difficult to manage.
Sure.
Lots of highs, lots of lows,
Okay.
and I think it was the prospect probably of cooking for 14 at Christmas, and the highs and the lows, you think, how the hell am I going to do this? I think I just went in weeping.
Right.
To see the consultant, she got me on a bad day. I didn't mind weeping. And so she put me onto she said, why don't you go to a pump clinic and see what you think of it?
Okay.
And I did, and thought actually it's quite a good idea. And I saw the Omnipod, and that was good for me because I didn't want wires.
Mhm.
I couldn't really cope with that.
Sure. Okay.
So it's more a vanity, female vanity thing.
Yeah.
Sure.
That's why I didn't want to go onto a pump.
Right.
I
Okay.
was so sort of like no, and hospitals trying to encourage people onto them.
Yes.
And my consultant kind of like not misguided me, but just went, oh, how would you feel? Just try it for a little bit,
Mhm.
and I was like, okay, fine, but I can give it back, after a month.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and now I won't let him.
Why won't you let him run?
It's the thing is that I think like most of the people that I speak to at our hospital were all on the same basis, that we
Mhm.
couldn't change anything, and he kept saying this is the way forward, this will
Mhm.
work for you, because it was mornings and lunchtimes were great, but evenings the sugars just went completely berserk, couldn't do anything, and none of us could bring them down. There was
Sure.
a group of us, so he suggested we go on to a pump, and
Mhm.
female thing, I don't want something attached to me 24/7,
Yeah,
that wasn't my
mhm.
thing. But then now, having had the pump, there are so many positives, it so outweighs the being attached,
Okay.
there's just so many things.
To what extent do the rest of you that are using pump agree with what you're hearing so far?
I had
Go on, you go.
I had like a really different experience of like starting on it. I really, really wanted it and had to fight quite hard to actually get it. So
Why did you really want it?
well, I didn't initially, but once I found out a bit more, I saw that benefits could be. I think the reason I wanted it because at the time it was about 2 years after I was diagnosed, so I was a student, and
Okay.
I kind of saw that like the flexibility of having it would be really helpful.
What flexibility are you thinking of there?
Well, just like you can changing your basal rate really quickly and flexibly, eating between meals was a big thing. So personally, I've had at the time I had really, really good control of my numbers. So that was part of the reason why I had to fight quite hard to get it. But the only reason that I did was because my diet was I had a really, really strict controlled diet, and basically it was like almost no carbs, so I was like quite underweight, so I had to kind of make like a more like just reasonable case, like for overall health this is better, even though like it might not necessarily impact my numbers massively. So.
How about for yourself?
Well, I was, I had a great deal of trouble getting diagnosed because obviously they took my age and said I was type 2, and I've even had people look me in the eye and say, no, you're not type 1, you're type 2, and I say, look at me, I'm type 1, and I had to pay good money to get diagnosed
Right, okay.
because non-diagnosed GP who I've since left. Just didn't want to know anything about
So
it.
currently you're on a pump?
I've always been on the
You've always
just
been
about always.
Right,
So
okay.
if, as somebody we know said, if you want my pump back, you'll have to kill me first.
Okay. Why would they have to kill you first? What is it about the pump for you that's so important?
Well, lots of reasons. One, I do a lot of sport,
Okay.
and I have a lot of trouble with that. And I could turn it off, turn it down. You can just adjust things. But
Right,
also,
okay.
amazingly, I don't have much experience of not having a pump.
Sure.
And I had a VO to start with, but this business of going out and looking down your shirt and pulling your thing out, it's just ridiculous.
So currently you're using
I'm Omnipod,
Omnipod,
but
right?
interestingly, where I go to the hospital, Omnipod isn't one of theirs.
Right, okay.
So I'm very interested when I'm due to replace quite soon. I would change hospitals rather than have a pump with a tube on it.
Okay. And Jenny, you're...
Yeah, so mine's also for sport. Basically, was my kind of original reason because it's much more flexible for that. You can mess around in a much more immediate way with the canal injections.
Okay.
I wasn't sure about it either. I was very against the whole idea of tubes and stuff, just because I'm the kind of person that gets caught on. You know how it is. And I thought it would be really awkward. So actually, interestingly, the FreeStyle Libre was a bit of a gateway thing for me. So I wore that for a few months. And it's so easy. And
You wore that before?
yes, so I had that from when it started, and it was so easy wearing stuff. You know, it's just a thing that you don't notice, and so off the back of that, I thought, well, maybe I can wear a pump, and maybe I can wear an Omnipod. And I went in expecting to have to fight for it as well, because my numbers were low enough that I wasn't automatically on the criteria, so I had a big list of stuff to go in and say I must have it because of this, and actually I went in and I said, can I have one? And they said, yes, of course you can. So actually it was very easy.
Okay. How about for you, Mark?
Completely opposite. I've tried to get a pump for ages, and there's just no leeway.
Why are you trying to get a pump?
Well, it's interesting to hear the positive feedback, because I mean I'm always up for trying new things. Like I was one of the first to try the FreeStyle Libre, I think, and I've been on pens for 16 years, and it works for me most of the time. My numbers are actually pretty good. They're pretty much near non-diabetic numbers, and I think that's probably the main reason why I'm not being offered it.
Right. Okay.
And also I've been living in the States for a while, but it's frustrating trying to get a pump.
But why is it? Is it purely about trying something new, or is there another?
It's trying to, and obviously
reason?
positive feedback. I mean, I don't know many diabetics in person, but you do hear positive feedback through Facebook or through the online boards.
So what would you hope to achieve or experience?
For me, it's the extremes. So when I go, for example, I usually go high when I'm asleep. So I wake up, like this morning I woke up and I was high.
Yeah.
And whereas I'm hoping a pump would at least limit that, would reduce that risk.
How would it do that?
I have no idea. I'm hoping my doctor.
Okay, right.
That's one of the really high up criteria
Yeah,
for
sure.
phenomenon. So you ought to be able to push for it on that.
Yeah,
level.
exactly. So it's being manual all the time. You always have to be on it. I'm hoping the pump.
Or change to a hospital that
Yeah.
Change
Well,
your hospital, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I changed hospitals not for that reason, and it's a big deal, but it isn't. Just
Sure.
go somewhere that's keen on pumps.
Yeah.
Tom, how about
It's
you?
interesting actually listening to all the pros and cons actually. I live in the sticks, so my hospital, it wouldn't be on the cards. Wouldn't be on the cards unless I was massively out of range on HbA1cs. Having said that, I've been diabetic a long time, so I've found a lot of methods and techniques over that time to kind of suit myself really. I've got a 6% HbA, really happy with it. I've been very resistant of a pump anyway. I've read a lot about it and I keep kind of looking, it's the other side, as it were.
Why resistant?
The same reasons that everyone else has given, to be honest. The attachment side of things, the fact you might have tubes. I get the positive, but then there's a size factor as well. I play a lot of contact sports, which probably for me would be somewhat of a problem because I can't imagine where I'd put it that it would be out of the way. But having said all of that, even taking that into consideration, because I've managed to find a routine that works for me, I'm kind of resistant to break it. I guess call that being a bit older and a bit sillier, I guess, or a bit more stuck in my ways.
Okay, well let's move on slightly and begin kind of move more towards discussing FreeStyle Libre. But so can we just very quickly go around the table? If you could just tell me how long you've been using the FreeStyle Libre Flash, please.
I think it's about a year 1 month maybe.
1 year.
Since the beginning, so since, I guess, I don't know, October
Totally.
2014.
Okay.
Since the start.
5 months.
Okay.
Since last June, so almost a year.
Okay.
Since November.
Okay.
October 14.
Okay.
Near the beginning, just, I can't remember when that was, but roughly at the beginning, before there was a shortage of them.
Yeah. When you can just buy them, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, same here, October 2014.
Okay, so we'll talk a lot more about FreeStyle Libre from here on, but before we do, how, if you could just tell me a bit about how you how you're actually testing your blood glucose levels before you moved on to FreeStyle Libre. So how are you testing glucose levels?
Lots of
Yeah.
test strips.
Yeah.
They're just all the time is the answer to that.
Okay.
Well, or not, depending on how many test strips
Yeah.
people want from Ed.
So which just quickly, which devices, which meter are you using?
Well, I've had access to about 4 or 5.
Okay.
And I'll be able to do that, so I've used the whole lot.
Okay. How about for us? Is there one in particular you
I
were
think
using?
I used the Contour
Right, okay.
that was wireless to the Omnipod outfit, I think.
Right. Okay.
Mine was One Touch, I think, but
Yeah,
I think
right.
we've all kind of used everything
Yes,
at some
yes,
point.
right,
You
exactly.
give them 3 meters because they want you to use their test
Okay.
strips.
How would you describe your experience of pre FreeStyle Libre? How would you describe your experience of measuring your?
It seemed okay at the time, I
What-
think.
what was
I'm
okay?
happy to say that it seemed to work at the time, but having so much more information now,
Mm-hmm.
it was obviously, you can look back and say, well,
Okay.
obviously wasn't as good as it could have been.
Okay. But if we hold that thought and think back to when you were living the testing by this other method, for example, how often were you testing? What things did you like?
I went through a few years where I wasn't doing any at all.
Right. Why was that?
Because nothing ever, apart from having something to give the doctors at my yearly, because my control was always sort of pretty good, not fantastic, but not awful. And I never got a pump for the same reason, because my control wasn't, and I would have loved one. But now actually I found that the Libre has had such a massive impact. I don't know if I need to think about pumping one, but yeah, so I went through years of not doing any because it just didn't really affect things. There was a big push when I was about 18 or 19. I was still seeing being seen in the children's ward at the hospital, because I was just about to go off to uni. So they said, "Well, stay with us, and then you can go off and be an adult when you go to uni." And there was a big thing then for not doing so much testing, not for money reasons, but because you should get used to feeling how your body, knowing what your body is doing.
So when you say not doing too much testing, what kind of frequency of finger pricking are we thinking of here?
Well, I mean, I literally went for years without doing
Right.
any at all.
Okay. How about the rest of you? How often were you finger pricking?
Well, before a meal, after 2 hours after a meal, and absolutely no pattern of any sort.
Right. Okay.
And then, before the next meal, after the next meal.
So how many times a day, roughly?
There's also pre-pump and post-pump.
Yeah.
Because
Yes.
pre-pump you test 6 times a day, perhaps.
Yeah, I used to try and keep it to six or seven,
Yes.
six or
Well,
seven
that's
if I could, because again I ran into having to buy them
Yeah.
myself if I
Yeah,
went
we've got
past
so
over
many
that,
things.
which is
God,
Yes.
that one too.
yeah.
Because, but post-pump you test 10, 12 times a day. But again, it depends. I do a lot of sport.
Yeah.
Two daughters who are quite small, I have to drive, and you really have got to keep yourself on the ball. So I've got very punctured, calloused fingers. Which is still, they're much better now. But
Okay. Ty, how about you? What was your experience?
Yeah, it's
of-
interesting in talking that the early days there wasn't really a focus on blood testing, certainly from my local
Sure.
hospitals. I probably used to test once a day, probably for the first 15 years of diagnosis.
How about just before the period of time before FreeStyle
I did
Libre?
the Daphne course
Right, okay.
back in the early 2000s. I can't remember exactly when. And that gave me some structure around blood testing and eating, obviously. So from that point onwards, I was doing at least a box of test strips every few days. days, so you know, good 10 plus. And I was happy to do it, to be honest.
Okay.
It did make a big difference, but it was about having, you needed to understand the card size in order to get the benefit from the blood testing side, whereas all I was doing it for before was just to make the GP happy.
Yeah.
Okay. Ronnie, you kind of seem to agree. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, no, same thing, sort of like used to test as much as possible, but I had like yourself as my GP wouldn't prescribe the strips,
Right.
and so my doctor was always there, and my hospital were very helpful, then pushed. So it was that fight, and I was like, oh God, you know, one of those, and with the fingers, so it was a case of, can I do it today or not? You know, you try and do as much as possible.
If you do it enough, you can just keep bleeding. All
No,
day.
it's
Squeeze hard enough.
let's test.
So where did you, I mean, what would be nice, I mean, we've got a lot to cover, so if I move you on at times, I'm not being rude, I just want to make sure we cover everything, it's all so valuable to us. But I just want to think about, from the moment that you first heard about FreeStyle Libre Flash up until almost, I suppose, present day. So if we turn the clock back, I know you all kind of start on Flash various periods in time, but just briefly, firstly, how did you first hear about the FreeStyle Libre Flash system?
With my mum. My mum's like my researcher for everything diabetes related.
Right.
So maybe she just tells me about everything.
Okay.
I was quite like, I wasn't very in favour of it to begin with, and I think
Why weren't you in favour?
it was because I thought I'd get like information overload, and I would, and like it might be stressful knowing that much. I think.
Okay,
Or
you're nodding
like-
your head as well.
Lots of people say that.
Yeah,
definitely.
I mean obviously like I changed my mind and then
Yeah.
it didn't happen at all, but that was my initial reaction.
Okay. How does that compare
Yeah.
to the rest of you, thinking about your initial reactions when you first heard about it?
My the diabetic nurse, we just met here, we know each other, but the diabetic nurse we had at the time, I rang her for whatever reason, normally because there was absolutely no pattern anywhere, but there obviously was, but none that anybody could fathom.
Yeah.
And she just said, oh, I've been on this fantastic thing today. You know, it tells you your blood sugar all the time, and it cost about a cup of coffee a day was her phrase,
Okay.
which I thought was quite interesting. It doesn't feel like that when you're paying for
That's
it.
what they were told.
Sure.
I didn't have any hang-ups about it,
Right.
because you could just buy a starter pack.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's their biggest selling point.
Mm.
Well, and it's such a cheap startup cost, isn't it? I heard about it on social media, so I do, which is why I was in on
You did as well,
on
Mark.
week one.
Same
So
here, same here.
yeah,
I did
because
that
it was so
after.
everywhere, wasn't
Yes.
it? You know,
Mm.
they were quite clever with the marketing because they sent it out to the bloggers
Okay.
and things, and then it sort of
Really,
appeared
really,
straight
really,
away.
really well
And it
done.
meant you could
Yeah.
get in there right from day one.
Yeah.
pretty much.
Okay. How about you, Ty?
Funny enough, I saw an advert before the bloggers
Ooh, that's
were into
interesting.
it.
Where was this advert?
It was on Facebook.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And to be honest, I ignore a lot of the diabetes adverts I see on Facebook, so I don't know how it jumped out. So credit to the marketing people, but I saw it and I thought, that's rubbish. That's never going to be
Rubbish
they're never going to
because-
be able to bring that to market. That's never
Yeah.
going to work, etc., etc. And then on the other hand, I thought that could be really useful. I might keep an eye on that.
So
So
what?
I applied, and obviously a few weeks later, I got the sign up.
So when you initially heard about the FreeStyle Libre, at that initial moment, and where you began, where your interest maybe increased slightly, what was it that was kind of fueling your interest in this in the FreeStyle Libre Flash system?
So
Yeah.
Sorry.
No finger pricking.
No finger
Well, not
pricking?
see, I had done odd bits of CGM previously, having made quite a fuss about it and
Mhm.
tried to get things, but the hospitals don't often have things to hand out, so I'd done blind things and things like that. So I was definitely interested in it, and honestly, the fact that you could pay 50 quid and have what you would be paying someone else 3,000 to set
Mm.
up
That's
was
the absolute
just
selling
okay.
the
point.
most enormous
But
thing.
other, I
So
mean,
huge. I mean that really.
sure. Cost, obviously, we'll talk about that. But cost is important. It is always going to be important. But if we kind of put that to one side for the moment, when you first heard about the FreeStyle Libre Flash system, what was it that was capturing your interest and your desire?
Well, I was about to have an operation on my feet, which meant 6 weeks with my feet up. And I do a lot of sport every day, so I knew I'd have to reset my basals, everything. And I heard about this, and I looked at the Dexcom, and that was too much, so and they were talking about cost. And I saw the Flash Libre, I thought that'd be fantastic if I could get hold of it, so I did.
Mm.
And
It would be fantastic because of
because it meant
what
I could reset my basals. Resetting your basals is just a pain in the ass.
Sure.
You're post-operative,
Okay.
effective anaesthetic and this, that and the other.
Mhm.
So it just meant that I could reset my basals very quickly, very easily.
Okay.
And I did, it worked.
Okay. How about for the rest of you? What were you when you initially heard about FreeStyle Libre? What, if anything, did you think this could do for you?
For me, it was a combo. It was just the convenience of not having to either A, remember, because it'll, unless you don't do it for your 8 hours,
Having to remember.
it'll keep to do a test. It'll keep
Right.
recording stuff for you. Because I'm really scatterbrained. So because I've been diabetic so long, it's not ever in the forefront of my mind. It sounds crazy, but I don't remember not being diabetic because I was 8 when I was diagnosed.
Okay.
And so I'd forget.
You
Even
forget
even
what?
to do a test. So
To
even
finger prick.
Yeah, so
Right,
even
okay.
when I was trying to be really good and using my bolus calculator on, and things like that, I just wouldn't remember.
Okay,
And the
okay.
fact that I can just, or I would remember and I think I can't get it out and do it right now. I'm in the middle of something, I'll do it in a minute, and the minute would go. And I'd
So it kind of set that whole kind of do it right now, do it in a minute, that whole kind of convenience side. To what extent was convenience a draw?
I think that's the key word. So for me, it was working in an office. Like if you're in a meeting, you can just go like that,
Yeah.
which is huge. And like in winter as well, like if you've got cold fingers, it's nightmare as everyone knows it. So
Okay.
if you're on the tube as well, you just go like that. This
Okay.
convenience is definitely key.
What other factors
I
driving
didn't
your
care
interest?
about. I didn't care about finger pricking. It wasn't a problem particularly. I did it and it was fine. And the convenience is good, but it's not about that. It's about the availability of data. It's
Right.
about the fact that you have the continuous data.
So what were
And I
you
had,
hoping?
I think,
You said, having continuous data. So when you heard about FreeStyle Libre and you're
Yeah.
kind of associated with the continuous data, in what way did you feel that would enrich or improve your life, if at all?
Well, I mean, having looked at and read about CGM generally and how it could improve things. I mean, it's just clear that it can improve. It's clear that it can improve things because a finger prick tells you what is happening at a moment in time, and there's only so even if you test 10 times a day, say, which sounds like quite a lot. There's an awful lot of gaps between your 10 times a day, whereas to be able to eat and then see what happens, or go out running and see what happens over the course of that. I mean, you can react then. I'm quite reactive. I'm not great at patterns and planning and stuff like that. I just like to deal with stuff as it comes. But also you can then use it for. So the only thing I'd ever done with the CGM type data before was blind ones. So you can use it for patterns and planning. You can see what effect everything has, and you just can't do that without the continuous data.
Yeah,
You've got no idea without, and it's magic, that stuff. It's completely life changing, and I think having kind of done a bit of research and stuff on that kind of thing before, I guess I sort of hoped that it might be.
It's kind of where I came from, because I don't think any diabetic that's looked into CGM needed selling the benefits of it. I think we all researched it and gone, no, it looks great.
But what was great for you though? So what were you hoping to get out of this?
It's all about the data at the end of the day.
With a view to do what or change what in your
to manage my day-to-day eating, my day-to-day injecting, the management of my condition. What was interesting was the first time I read about CGM, I think I wrote off to one of these companies that provided these devices, and I got this formal quote back, and it was all on letter-headed paper, and I thought, wow, this looks expensive. I opened it up, and it was like $2,000 or
Quite
something.
shocking, isn't it? Yeah.
So I kind of, to be honest, that was the last time I looked at CGM, because I
Okay.
thought, wow, that's way out of my price thing, and I didn't know about the Dexcom and etc. But I had heard that they were kind of expensive.
Okay.
So I think for me, the FreeStyle hit the spot at the right time, because it came very obviously with the price attached to it. So then the benefits of the CGM were obvious to me before I
When I
made that
When
commitment.
I started on the Libre, so there's only back in November, I was on Nova Rapid, and the Libre immediately showed me that Nova Rapid was taking an hour to work.
Yeah.
And so I went to the nurse and went, look, see, that's what
Okay.
I didn't
I think-
that's when it,
Yeah.
But we'll come
Yeah,
on to that. It's really important we understand that. But I'm thinking pre that. So when you first heard about it, what was drawing you towards FreeStyle
I
before you'd even used it?
Well, I work in IT, and I love the data that I get from it, but I want more from it. I want to be able to. That's probably my only reservation with it, is that at the moment there's not enough tools I can use to crunch the data to get some really interesting stuff. Not the, I mean, the stuff you get is fabulous.
On Libre.
And
But if you turn the clock forward to before you started to use it,
Yeah.
for you, before you even handled the device,
Yeah.
why did you want it?
data.
With a view to do what? What were you hoping that data would?
To replicate as closely as possible what your pancreas does when it's working.
Right. Okay. With it, I mean, you mentioned a number of factors that were kind of driving your interest in acquiring a FreeStyle Libre Flash system, but to what extent where did you associate any potential emotional or even psychological benefits?
No, but you feel better if your levels are fairly good. I mean, today's not too bad. I played golf this morning. Last week I played golf, even with the Libre, and I went up to 23.5 in the afternoon. Well, I've got to find out why, and the hospital doesn't know. I go to a sports clinic and they've never come across it, but we can get to the bottom of it. And the reason was just because to try and stop all the highs and lows, and you'd feel better.
Okay, how about for yourself, Rana? What was it, why were you interested in Flash system?
We're just getting more data, as everyone has said, because basically doing a test strip now tells me what it is now, but it doesn't tell me what's going to happen, whether it's going up or down.
How
With
do
the
you?
Libre, the arrow is the most fantastic
Yeah.
thing.
Okay.
That to me is fantastic. You know, you cannot put
Okay.
words for
But how-
what it does.
And we'll talk more about the kind of the different arrows and how you react if you do to those. But you mentioned the data. Before you started to use the system, how did you hope that data would change how you manage your diabetes?
Because then I can link it. So taking a test now, 2 hours later, 2 hours later, 2 hours later, you kind of like build a profile, but sometimes you just don't understand what's happened in between.
Yeah.
Whereas the Libre actually gives you the graph, and you know that in those 2 hours there was a peak.
Yeah.
You know, whereas you could miss it if
Yeah,
you
you
get
wouldn't
to
have
the
seen it
previous,
otherwise,
you wouldn't
yes.
see
Right.
it.
Okay.
So,
So go for it, Colin. Sorry.
I think I'm just wanted to say something because I felt really differently before getting it, because I was kind of on the fence about it, and I think it's just because I hadn't really done that much reading. As I said, I'd heard what my mum had told me, and I'd started to do a bit of reading about it, but I wasn't really like, oh my gosh, I must have this. It was getting it that made me realise I had to have it.
So why, even though you weren't thinking, oh my gosh, I've got to have it,
Yeah.
why did you
I think,
have
if
it?
I remember rightly, I think it was because I mean, generally, I think it was at a time in my life where, like, I had sort of slightly less good control than I had done at certain other points, and sort of, it felt like it was just because, like, I had I'm just too busy, or I wasn't organised enough to do as much testing and as much monitoring and kind of like looking at patterns and stuff, and I had time to do that in the past, and I think I just thought, oh well, maybe this would be useful because, as you say, like if I forget to test, I can still find out later what it was or whatever. But then the actual trigger, I think, was I broke my collarbone last summer, and I just sort of had some time, which sounds a bit weird, but I think it was just like, oh well, while I've not got too much else to worry about, I was off work for a few weeks and stuff, so it's like maybe this is a good time to sort of try it out and see. But yeah, it was nothing. It was more just seeing the impact once I actually had it.
Right, well, we're going to talk a lot more about that. It'd be really interesting to understand how if at all, it's impacted on your life and how you manage diabetes. Some of you mentioned, or one or two of you mentioned, when you first heard about FreeStyle Libre system, you mentioned also other systems on the market, and CGM systems. So when you were kind of thinking about whether or not to move on to the FreeStyle Libre system, were any of you also thinking about or even considering any CGM systems?
Yes.
I
I was having a look at the.
So rather you were, Jane, you were.
Looking at the Dexcom, and the cost was just too much for me, and we're just trying to get more of a grip on what was going on throughout the day, because of all the things that were happening.
Why were you thinking? Why were you considering the Dexcom?
Because I was fed up with highs and fed up with lows, and you just know. I know from sport, you go and see diabetic specialists for half an hour twice a year, and that's it. and that's your information. So really, you have to analyse it. You have to become the expert of you,
Okay.
Absolutely.
not anybody else. So I thought that would help me better to maintain control. And I do want to maintain control. I want to try and keep it. I have very good HbA1cs pre and post pump, and pre and post the Libre. So again, that was a different thing that we were talking about earlier. But somebody said, I think there's a medic who just said, normally it's a bit like going on a tightrope. It's like walking a tightrope and rope. And you take your mask, you blindfold, you take your mask off 6 times a day or however often you test.
Okay.
And that's the best analogy that I can have. So now I know more about what's going on with me.
So you were considering Dexcom Runner. What CGM system were you toying with?
The same thing, Dexcom was the one to look at, and then I thought, okay, same as you said,
Yeah.
basically it came down to price, because
Yes.
it's self-funded.
Why was it that you went for FreeStyle Libre system other than price?
That's
Price.
that's
Okay.
the reason.
Yeah.
Because
Is that the sole reason?
Well, it's
Well,
upfront
there's-
price.
there's a big difference between investing. If you invest £3,000 in something, then you're basically stuck with it forever. Whereas you can chuck 100 or 150 or whatever the starter pack was or something,
Yes.
and if it doesn't work, that's fine. It doesn't work. You don't have to use it forever. It's it's a very different thing. Whereas, that's it really. I mean, it's just it makes it so accessible.
Okay.
I actually came across the Libre accidentally from the other side, not looking for CGMs, but
Right.
looking for futuristic diabetic gadgets, things on Kickstarter and like the Google contact lens and all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
So I was looking at future stuff,
Okay.
almost because I work in IT, so I'm massively geeky. So I just wanted anything to make this kind of annoying thing cooler,
Yeah, a bit more fun.
more fun,
Yeah.
and
Okay.
and fit in with the rest of everything that I do.
Mm.
And then I found out that there was, so I never considered any of the other CGMs.
Okay.
Then I found out there was this thing that I could actually buy already, that I didn't have to pre-fund or
Yeah.
wait to
Okay.
10 years to go through testing and stuff.
How about for you guys, Ty? Tricia, were you mentioned you weren't considering any CGM version?
No, because it's actually the same reason, because the upfront cost, because we belong to a pump group, and I'm always saying to them, buy the Libre, if only you buy one, you've got nothing to lose,
Right,
because
okay.
you're going to get 4 weeks of data,
Mm-hmm.
and you can in fact never buy any more again if you don't want
Okay.
to, but you couldn't do
Okay.
that. I mean, I didn't consider the others because of the price.
Well, was that, accepting the fact that Libra's, as you mentioned, more accessible financially, it's more affordable?
Well, up front it's...
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
It's about
the
the same.
initial.
It's
Okay.
not
Yeah,
much
the running
different.
costs.
But in your mind, were there things CGM system were offering potentially that were more attractive than what Libre was offering?
Well, the Dexcom's got all the bells and whistles, I think,
Yes.
at the end of the day.
Well, what are the bells
Yes.
and whistles, right?
I mean, that is your thing that you want at the end of the day.
What are those bells and
It's got
whistles?
all the alarms, so if you put in your overs and unders kind of thing, it will then alarm every time you go over.
How
before you have
attractive?
to-
How attractive would that have been?
Well, for me at the moment, I'm fine, but I know a lot of people that have actually lost their warning signs, so they rely on it to wake up. You
But
know.
back when you're making the decision whether to go FreeStyle Libre or not, knowing that these other systems
Yeah.
that where the initial outlay is more expensive would offer alarms and the bells and whistles.
Well,
how
again, well, it came to I
Price.
don't know whether it's going to work or not. And yes, if this doesn't work, I've only lost this amount. I haven't lost that much.
Interestingly, at the time I thought the alarms and things didn't matter. I thought I didn't want that kind of thing, and I still don't want that kind of thing. But and that seemed to be the big difference between them at the time.
Exactly.
But I since learned that there's a little bit more to it than that. So it's not actually just the alarming that's useful. The constant transmission is also a big plus point for the Dexcoms, because you can then join in with all the people who are hacking and playing with them and,
Yes.
and transmit them to
Okay.
other things, which currently you can't do
Exactly.
Yes.
with the Libre and just again because of wanting to make it a bit more fun and wanting to get involved and not liking other people doing things without me, I am sort of now thinking about looking into something else so that I can do that, so I can play the games really.
Sure.
For me, the other manufacturers weren't on the card for the reason I gave earlier, which was I'd been put off in the very early days of CGM by high prices, so I
Right.
stopped looking. That was
Yeah.
it. So the
Right,
Libre
okay.
managed successfully to punch through that
Mhm.
and to bring my attention to something that I may not have otherwise considered. Obviously, like yourself, I've seen that there are other devices out there, but I'm still put off by that high perceived
Right.
cost.
Yeah.
It may not
Okay.
be the truth. I
No,
don't know.
so
Well,
when
you
you-
still
it's
look
still
at the
pretty-
yearly
yeah.
cost actually, and how long it lasts. I think we all moan about the fact it's just 2 weeks, and a Dexcom sensor I think can last up to something like 39
Okay.
days.
Give or take, yeah.
So, and you look at the overall cost. I think in the end, it's because you do get caught into the whole thing.
Mm.
It's so expensive, and you don't want to lose it.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
just before you started to use the FreeStyle Libre system, was there? I mean, did you teach yourself how to use it and introduce yourself to it, or was there any formal?
YouTube.
What if any training was there for you to?
No, there's none.
It was-
Okay, so how did you
It was pretty
initially?
Leaflet.
So you need the leaflet. Mark, you mentioned
well,
YouTube.
My main thing was how to get that on, because it looks quite scary the first time you do it.
Okay.
And
It is.
I saw a video, I think on Facebook or YouTube, of a little girl doing it herself, and I was like, oh, it's
Okay.
easy.
I mean, how does that mirror the rest of your experiences with you? Is it the same or any other sources?
I'm sure I find a video on YouTube somewhere.
YouTube,
The Facebook group.
Facebook.
Mhm.
right? Okay. So did
There's
any?
no training.
That's what I was going to ask. So
Yeah.
none of you sat down with a diabetes nurse or another healthcare practitioner for them to.
You
Right.
get it in the post and it's your
But we
That's
are
not fair.
fairly,
When
we
I
are
showed
all
my
fairly conscious of
nurse.
gadgets, I think.
Yes, although to be
So
fair,
what-
it is
And
also
we are fairly hard nosed.
it is also very easy.
And it's very easy.
It is very
Yeah.
easy.
Very
It's much
easy.
easier than some of the
Yeah.
other equivalents. If
So-
you watch
so
the
that-
Dexcom insertion.
When you think back to how you initiated yourself and learned about it, how smooth was that process? How easy was that process?
Put the first one
Well,
in.
no, just had to learn to train yourself on how to use this thing.
Really easy.
Super easy.
Yeah.
Super
Really
easy.
easy.
Right.
Okay.
What was the daft question? What was easy? What made this easy?
I think just look at the look
Yeah.
at
Look at the
leaflet
screen.
and read it
Right.
if you can
Well, you've
read.
got to
Yeah.
put it in, you look
Okay.
at the screen. But I
Yeah.
know a lot of people who don't go into such depth as I do, but you're not actually going into depth about the Libre, you're going into depth about your own programming.
Right.
The software on the thing is very intuitive. It's, you know,
Yeah, if you
it's very, you know, there are a few options and you,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
it, that's it really.
Okay.
There's nothing.
And what about for yourself, Mark? How easy did you find it? You
I
mentioned
found-
YouTube.
I found it easy, but I personally, overall, my experience has been sort of love-hate with FreeStyle Libre. I've had a lot of failed sensors,
Right,
Yeah.
especially in the beginning, where it fell off for no obvious reason. So I've had to resort to rock tape most of the time to stick it in, especially when playing contact sports.
Right.
So that was the main negative for me. It's
Mm.
that learning curve, because they don't give you any information. Well, as far as I can remember, when you first get a sensor about how to use it, they say you can swim with it for 30 minutes.
Mhm.
But I found it's not actually that as robust as I thought it was going to be.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, one of the biggest things I learned from the Facebook group was the various products you can use to keep it on. Because when it costs you 50 quid,
Mhm.
whether it should stay on or not is kind of
Mm.
by the by. When you've knocked your first one off on the
Mm.
door frame, because you're really clumsy, which I am, you think I don't care what it looks like.
Okay.
I want the best thing to cover it up. And
But
then
are
the group
these
was great for
are
that.
these kind of tips you picked up before you properly started to use it, or part way through using it?
Both.
Both.
Right.
Yes. Yeah, I would say both.
Okay, we in a short while we're going to really kind of focus in a little more detail, thinking about the sensor, the inserter, the reader, etc. Before we do, I just want to take a step back. So you told me a bit about your kind of journey to begin to use the FreeStyle Libre flash system. Now that you've been using it for these varying periods of time, to what extent has the FreeStyle Libre system performed as you hoped it would? Have you got out of it what you initially hoped you would?
And so much more.
Yeah.
It's a
But
game
specifically, once you get over the hangover of the fact that it's plus or minus 20% on the what's the word, truth of what of what the realistic figure is.
You're thinking accuracy here?
Accuracy is the word I'm
Right,
after.
okay. No, I wasn't correct, I just wanted to make sure I was clear what
Yeah.
you're saying.
No,
Okay.
you're absolutely right. Once you've got over that hangover,
Mhm.
and you watch the arrows, which is fantastic, it's
Mhm.
fine, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what is it, So it seems quite overwhelmingly it's done what you thought it would, if not more. Can you tell me more about that in terms of what it has done for you as far as impact?
It gives you more confidence, it makes you live your life in an easier way, it's convenient. I can give you all the negatives as well, but we can do that later on.
Or you can do that at the same.
But it's, it's made my life better.
How has it done it? What has it done that's made your life better?
Because it fits into the convenience of my life. If I go for a run, I can take a load of blood testing stuff and test halfway through. With the Libre, I can just whip it out, the sensor, and just see where I am, see what I'm doing, if I'm going up or down. If I'm doing another sport, I can see if my sugar's going up, and I can adjust and make adjustments later on. If I'm playing squash, I can test in between the end of a game, and just see where I'm going. If I'm feeling knackered because I'm knackered and it's been a hard game, or if it's because my sugar's going low. Same with tennis. So I do other things apart from sport.
Okay.
I found it the same thing, but not with sport, because I don't do any sport, but with how I feel, things that I've never ever considered might be to do with my diabetes, ability to concentrate and moody stuff. I sit in front of a computer screen all day,
Right.
but I work from home, and I get bored sometimes, and you sort of think, oh man. And having the Libre has shown that actually a lot of those times it's because my blood sugar's doing weird stuff that I wouldn't have realised otherwise. Not dramatic stuff, not like going through the roof, but just rumbling up or the steepness of the curve, which I'd never get from a blood test, can have quite a massive impact on how I feel.
Okay. How else has the FreeStyle Libre impacted on the way that you manage your diabetes? What has it improved?
It gives you so much information.
No, go on.
It gives you more. Okay, so it gives you more information. So how has that more information impact on how you manage your diabetes?
Well, like we were saying earlier, you do a blood test, it just tells you what it is now. But having the Libre, it gives you a number, but it tells you with an arrow as to which way it's going. So you can then decide, depending on if you are going to go out and do any sport, whatever, do you need correct or not correct? You're better equipped to manage what you need to do with your diabetes.
Okay.
But I've massively changed what I do off the back of having the information as well, which is common to lots of people. Again, if you look on the groups and stuff, everyone finds the same things out within the first 2 weeks, and they're like, this is amazing. You see the same thing happening. So, for example, the action of the insulin, everyone finds out instantly that they eat breakfast, and so they previously used to test before breakfast and test an hour or two after breakfast, and when everything looked good, and they didn't notice the thing that did this in the middle. So it's changed the way that I and everyone doses for their meals, all of that sort of thing.
So what are you now doing differently?
Well, for me, I now try and take insulin quite a long time before I eat,
Right.
which is not the advice that's given to you for lots of obvious reasons. And you wouldn't want to do it if you couldn't see the lines, because it's quite a scary thing to do.
When you say when you couldn't see the lines, you're referring to?
When you couldn't see the graph. If you didn't have a graph, you wouldn't want to be doing that. It's not a clever thing to do if you're completely blind.
Right, okay.
So it has just opened up all these things which you can suddenly do, and it's made for me as well. Now, what I do is, the way that I manage is massively reactive, which you couldn't have done based on finger pricks. So I don't know whether it's a good thing or not, but I quite like it. But I constantly microdose in both directions to stay within that. So it's just you just couldn't have done that before, and that's an unforeseen for me. I had thought, I'll have the nice data and I'll be able to identify trends and stuff like that, which I can, but it's not just that. I mean, the actual day-to-day and the reactive stuff, it just means you don't even have to think about it. You just go, what's happening now? I'll deal with that, and you've dealt with it.
Okay. Tell me more about the impact. How, if at all, it's changed your management?
I think in terms of confidence for me, having had 30 years.
Confidence of it in it, yes, that's right.
Well, and you're talking to people, you're reacting different ways, you're just socially, and you never know. You think, God, I feel like this because I'm. Every now and again, I just think, oh God, I really hate these people. I want to go away and hide and check your sugar later on. And you think, oh God,
did you really hate them?
I really couldn't. They weren't so bad after all. So my confidence has improved. You're talking, you're in meetings. Just general interactions.
How does it? Can you unpick that whole impact on confidence? What can you tell me more about how precisely the FreeStyle Libre's impact on your confidence?
Because in the past, if I'm say talking to a solicitor or if I'm in work mode,
Mhm.
and I just think, I'm thinking about how I'm feeling all the time. I'm thinking about how am I feeling. Am I feeling high? Am I feeling low?
Mhm.
Is my brain not thinking because my sugar's on its way down,
Right.
or am I just not thinking properly because I'm just having a bit of a thick moment? And you never know. You just constantly got all these
Okay.
voices in your head. I'm going to sound great, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You've got that, you're just constantly thinking about
Right.
which direction you're going in.
But now?
No, much better. I feel confident because I can check quickly, and
Right,
and
okay.
I know where I am, and I can see throughout the day. I can see throughout the night. Yeah, night times. So, occasionally often you wake up and you don't feel particularly good. You feel
Mhm.
and you check it. You check at the lines over the night, and I realise I've gone high, or I realise I've gone low.
Okay.
And I know why, and I know the reason for it.
Mhm.
So that gives me confidence.
Okay. How about for you, Tom?
Gives you a lot of insight into the future, actually,
Yeah.
which is what I found.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Historically, with blood tests, you kind of it's all about what's happened in the past. So you
Mhm.
do a blood test and you go, oh great, I'm where I expected to be.
Right, okay.
I don't know where I'm going from here. I might eat this food and who knows what might happen
Mhm.
later on. Whereas with the Libre, you do start to see a lot of historical patterns that then lead you to know what's going to happen in the future. The breakfast spike's the classic one.
It is.
Yes.
Everyone says
It's
it.
the-
So how can you kind of explain how that's positively impacts on how you manage your diabetes?
Yeah, absolutely. It's it reduced my HbA by 1% almost within
Yeah.
a few weeks of
Instantly,
starting using
Right,
it.
okay.
And that's purely because it takes away the barrier for having to test and
Mhm.
giving you that insight. So
Mhm.
as you've done, Jenny, you take a lot more of a proactive approach without
Mhm.
it being an impact on
Yeah,
your
without
lifestyle.
having to worry about it.
Without to
Yeah.
feel like it's an impact on you personally, because
Mhm.
I've always resisted the diabetes lifestyle change.
Right.
I've always said I want to live how I
Uh-huh.
used to live, but you couldn't do that.
Right.
I
very
was
easily.
diagnosed with depression a few years ago, and my diabetes specialist said actually it's really common with
Mhm.
diabetics, anyone with long-term conditions, but particularly diabetes, because you have the constant reminder of this medical condition, regardless of kind of what it's actually doing. And I found that the Libre helps enormously with that, because I don't have to, I don't know, I don't have to remember to do stuff so much.
Okay.
I don't really know how to, you're sort of nodding, so I'm hoping it sort of vaguely makes sense, but it's
Maybe
like,
you're saying something that I have sort of thought but not fully articulated in my own head. It actually, that's exactly.
it's,
what I
it's
find as well.
it's sort of, it takes away some of the kind of,
Guesswork.
yeah, but
like it's like kind of less relentless.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Why, Jane? Why is it? What is it doing that makes it less
Part of it, I
relentless?
think, is that you don't, it's so quick and easy to check what your blood sugar is. I mean, like everyone says, the arrow is amazing, the graph is amazing, but I think for me, even if we didn't have the arrow or the graph, being able, if you just gave me a number and I had to write it down and do my own graphs and stuff, it would still mean that there was much less I had to do to get that information, you know.
Okay.
It's the odd days when I haven't had it, which are odd.
That's
Last
horrible,
year and a
isn't
half,
it?
I have never been through so many test strips in my
I know.
life.
Yes.